Hello, welcome to this video. Thank you so much for tuning in and sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos before, welcome. Welcome back if you have. My intention is unity and oneness. I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the energies that I've been experiencing, seeing, feeling, some synchronicities. And I just want to share right off the bat that so much shifts so quickly for me lately that I've been feeling almost like it's hard would be the wrong word, but it's challenging to get my bearings around what exactly did I just shift through? Where am I at now? How am I feeling? And even those questions where it used to be, I would ask why, or why is this happening? Or, okay, now I understand. It's almost like I'm just letting go of all of that. Not every day, not every moment. Some moments are easier than others. But when I just kind of let go and allow things to happen from a very organic, natural place, meaning I'm not pushing for something. I recognize what it is that I want to feel. And as I allow myself to feel that way, I am gifted with opportunities that come up that show me what doesn't make me feel that way, or certain aha moments that I have about myself or someone else that shows me this is not the direction that I need to go in any longer, if that makes sense. I was shown, I tried to kind of draw this out, and the best way to describe, it's almost a feeling of surrender. Surrendering to the now moment, surrendering to the conversations that are coming up. And the question then becomes, well, aren't we supposed to choose where we're going and how we're feeling? And aren't we supposed to know why it's all happening? And while understanding why something is presenting itself can be very valuable and important, for example, a memory of a childhood trauma that we may have buried deep inside of our muscles and tissue, or perhaps in the back of our memory, and we've stored all those emotions. And all of a sudden that memory comes up as we are doing a purge or a cleanse. This can be emotional or physical. And that can be very powerful, knowing as to why we're experiencing what we're experiencing. But there are equally important moments where I am being guided to not really have to understand why, just to let it be, let it go, let it flow. And that is assisting me in some forms to just move through it, almost like the need or the necessity for understanding certain traumas is actually no longer there either. And am I okay with just allowing it to be okay to not have to dig and figure out the answers to those questions that have been perhaps part of what I thought was important for so many years. The other theme, and I hope I said that clearly as possible. The other theme that's been coming up is bubbles being burst. And my guides keep sharing with me, or my higher aspect, or my inflow version of myself that isn't in resistance, that just allows these messages to flow through clearly. The answers show up in the form of sometimes just allowing. So one of the messages has been let go of expectations. Many people are really hung up on having an expectation of somebody. And time again, they are disappointed. And it's not necessarily of the same person. It can be that they're disappointed with themselves. I expected more of myself. Now I'm disappointed. Even that is a story that some people, myself included in this people category, some of us humans, have gotten in the habit of feeding into. And we're being invited to let go of the need to form an opinion about our particular reason why we're feeling disappointed. Let us perhaps take a step back and look at from a higher perspective and understand what disappointment really is. And if we have an expectation or a disappointment, all of those are set outside of us. It's putting our belief into something other than a oneness and unification and understanding that each situation, person, place, or thing is on their own journey. I wanted to share, as I'm saying this, I'm in flow, and I'm recognizing that oftentimes, even when I speak, I go into 5 different stories. As I'm speaking, I'm actually tapping into multiple vibrations of those who are listening or will be watching in the future. And so even the story that I am sharing in my voice, in my intonation, in my words and verbiage, may not always make sense on a linear point A to point B, because I'm plugging into examples and resources from a multidimensional perspective. So some of you guys might be going, well, she's not really following. And it's almost like a flow teaching style. That's been something that's been a little bit challenging for me to recognize also. So how do I pull in this point A to point B so that it can be very easy and understood easy and easy to follow? And the answer is, don't worry about it. So even our communication is a little wonky lately. That's been a key word for me, because it's almost like we'll catch ourselves saying something, and before we even say the words, or we might be in mid-sentence formations in our brain, the vibration all of a sudden isn't where we're at. So what I'm saying is, some of us are still plugging into old thought patterns of separation or beliefs or habits that we've become so entrained in vocalizing or creating in our world. And I'll come back to the disappointment. I'll come back to the expectation in just a minute. But what I'm saying is that we might find ourselves going to speak something, and then all of a sudden we lose our thought, or we lose our train of thought, or we go into mushy brain, or we can't quite get the words out because the words that we're about to speak are not necessarily truly aligned with who we really are or what it is that we're trying to convey. Does that make sense? I mean, it is multidimensionality, it's fluidity. And the more we can let go and just allow the words to come out, because we know we're in a place of higher functionality, a higher frequency, the words that come through are more in touch and in flow with our divine truth. So it's almost like many of us are channeling. We're channeling our higher selves. And because we're not necessarily used to being in that state of communication on a regular basis, it can make us feel wonky. So I went into 5 different layers there. Ultimately, how we are communicating has completely shifted, including our communication with our higher aspects, because we are, from my perspective, embodying that. And so as I start to speak something that perhaps I was in the habit of speaking about before, the way that I speak about it has shifted so dramatically that I no longer can hold the same pattern of words in order to explain what it is that I'm thinking about, because the thoughts no longer match up to my vibration. And so these thoughts are almost like bubbles popping. I have it, and then it's gone out the window, if that makes sense. I'm tying this all back into us being in the moment, letting go, and not being attached to certain outcomes, which ties it all back into expectations, if that makes sense. So I started off by kind of saying we have these expectations about ourselves, and then we're disappointed in ourselves for believing in some person, place, or thing. So let's tune into that a little bit. I'm gonna come back to the wonkiness in just a moment. So, nope, I'm being guided to keep on that thought trajectory and then tie it all in together. There we go. I'm in flow. This is an example of how this is working. It's trusting in these moment-to-moments ahas that are coming in and not blocking it by having to focus one-minded or on one thought, because as a multidimensional being, we are connected into so much more than these old patterns that were great. They helped us. Ego has been very helpful to us. But now we're being invited to see beyond that and to come back into unity and wholeness. And anybody that's ever channeled knows that it used to be where you feel like you just have to stop, tune in, and it can feel, sometimes there's a vibrational merge that happens. And sometimes it's hard to find the words that allow us to raise our frequency enough to where we can just allow that channeling to happen. It's not just about the words, it's a frequency, it's a vibration, it's a pattern. And so how do we do that? Well, we do the work, we do meditation, we do movement, yoga, we might do singing and toning, we may practice channeling and setting intention and setting the energy in the room. But what's happened for many of us is all that is great and important. Those rituals are important, but they're not as necessary anymore if we've done the work. If we haven't done the work, they're very necessary. Maybe for now, because it may not be that way in a month. I don't know. My point is, if we can find ourselves in a place of relaxed, calm, and open-hearted cognition, coherence, everything that we're seeking finds us, comes through us, because we are then tuned in to that channel permanently. And if we quit unplugging and plugging ourselves back in and then plugging into this and plugging into that, and we just open in a relaxed state from a place of coherence, which is harmonic, harmony, balance, neutrality. So finding neutral isn't always easy, yet it's the easiest thing because it's very natural to us. So being in duality or polarity, so to speak, isn't natural innately for us, even though it is part of our human experience. So as a higher being, it's more challenging to actually be angry. It's more challenging to judge others. It's an experience. Yet when we get back into a place of 0 point from a higher perspective, that's our natural space of being. And that can be sometimes more challenging than being in a place of judgment or anger or disappointment, because we are used to behaving in that way, because we have forgotten who we really are. And now that we're remembering or starting to feel more of that which we are, it can feel awkward and uncomfortable at first. Yet once we find that flow, there's nothing more natural. And we can then, once we're in it, go, wow, how could I have ever been disappointed in myself? How could I have ever placed these expectations on someone who is struggling finding that neutrality that I'm in this moment? And when I'm in that neutrality, there is no judgment, because we come back to that space of all is one, having a unique individual experience. I'm just in flow right now. And so what happens then is we don't worry or we don't judge or ask, well, how come that person doesn't understand us? Or how could they not see? Because even that question is coming from a place of non-neutrality, right? And that's okay. All of this is okay. And it's being in that space of recognizing that person has fallen so far away from who they really are. And when I say falling, I think of a falling star, going from one place, going from one state to another, burning up and going into this other. It's movement, it's flow. And I'm not saying it from a place of judgment, although if I have that, I recognize it, acknowledge it, and come back into a place of neutrality, meaning I'm not judging the fact that I'm judging. I'm acknowledging it, feeling what that feels like, and recognizing that that doesn't feel good. Or maybe in that moment it feels good, or it feels better than where I was before, and acknowledging that that has moved me into a place of judgment, whatever it was that I was judging. And recognizing that and coming back into a place of, wow, I just felt anger, shame, blame, doubt, judgment, whatever it might be. And just by acknowledging that can help bring me back into a place of integration, and then puts me into a place of harmony, balance, 0 point neutrality. I know all those words aren't 100% interchangeable, but I'm going to use them in this particular sharing as interchangeable. So back to the disappointment, back to things are happening around us that we may feel disappointed about. And this can also lead to us feeling disappointment in ourselves for having placed value on those systems, people, places, things, whatever it is that is outside of us, even though it isn't, right? Other people have made choices, for example, that make me feel disappointed in them and the choices that they've made. Therefore, I feel disappointed in myself because I had placed value in that person and thought better of them. How many of us have experienced that in our lifetime, right? I've experienced that quite a few times. I experienced it today. I recognized that I had this feeling of disappointment in a particular figure that I really admired. And I guess those are the words. But again, admiring someone. So I had to pull myself and recognize, wow, I feel I wasn't disappointed in myself, although that has happened. I've just went through that whole scenario. I'm sharing that with whoever's watching, because there are moments where we feel that way. It could be that we expected more out of a family member who perhaps was abusing narcotics, drugs, whatever, alcohol, and we thought that they were clean and sober, and then we find out that they have been lying to us. Then we're disappointed. I can't believe I fell for that one again, right? Judging ourselves, shame, blame, doubt, and then it goes into this whole cycle. So, I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment, but I'm going to finish my story. So I had this celebrity that I really celebrated. They made me laugh and I thought it was fun. And then I learned a truth about them, or perhaps one version of a truth that represents a certain timeline that this particular person has played a part in, that has could possibly be triggering me to see. So this is a more expanded awareness, right? I felt disappointment. And I recognized I was feeling disappointment. And then I integrated that and felt, I had recognized and liked this person, and now I'm recognizing that they've made some choices that are maybe not on the side of a particular balance that I was felt like they were a part of. And then I thought, wow, I just placed an expectation on somebody, which then set it sets me up that if they don't fall in that category of what my expectations were of them, then I'm disappointed. That it doesn't matter. Ultimately, it doesn't matter because they made those choices. What it all boils down to is that is a mirror for me to see and to witness that they made these choices. I do not honor the choices that they made, but they have nothing to do with me. That is their decision. And the disappointment is mine. I have to own it, recognize it, and integrate it that it's my disappointment. It's my judgment. Because by me expecting something of someone is creating non-neutrality. It's creating scales. It's putting weight on their scale. And if I acknowledge that that's what I was doing, it shifts the whole energy around that person. It shifts the whole energy around my relationship with that person, which is really non-existent. They don't know who I am, right? And it also then brings it back into allowing me to integrate all of those experiences of my own, because those belong to me. The judgment, the expectation, the disappointment, those all belong to me. And rather than turning it into a bigger story and making me disappointed in myself and recognizing that creates further separation, I was able to integrate it much more quickly than I have even several months ago. Several months ago, this might have affected me for several days or several weeks. And then I might have gone through that rabbit hole of showing myself more reasons to be disappointed, right? Oh, that's horrible too. Oh no, what about this? I let all that go today in that moment. And then what happened was I found myself seeing that this person is in a completely different reality than my own, yet we are still from the same cloth, which is source, the same fabric. We exist from this, whatever you want to call it, this energy, the spirit that moves in all things is also in this particular person. And maybe part of the reason I celebrated that person was because I could see that divine spark in them. I get emotional. I could see that divine spark in them, even though they're not playing the same game that I'm playing. Let me rephrase that. And I could say they're not on the same team that I'm on, which leads me back to the disappointment, which leads me back into the expectations. There's no teams if we look at it from a higher perspective. Doesn't mean I want to do things and follow in this person's footsteps. Even though I celebrated them, it was a moment of namaste. May the light within me see the light within you. I had seen that person and the light for who they really are. But the truth that's coming out is showing me who they are really not. And yes, that truth is not necessarily a positive thing, but I see them for who they really are. Even though they're choosing to play in a way different playing field, game, matrix, reality, that I don't want to be a part of. But I still see them. And maybe when they choose to, if they choose to not play that game anymore, they're going to benefit from me seeing them for who they really are. And I'm bringing this back into, let's say it's a family member that we love unconditionally because we see them. We see them, but they don't see themselves. They've gone so far down and into separation that they don't see the beauty of who they really are because the drugs have created this chemical barrier, we'll say. They have created barriers between their heart and their truth through source, through the crown. And many of us are coming into that space of assisting others just by holding space for them to dissolve, to integrate. And I hold in this moment no judgment, but I did hold it in that moment earlier when I found out this. And I recognized I've seen them the whole time for who they were. And that facade that they're putting on, they have a split, obviously, a dark and a light side, right? Which we all have, or we've all played in, so to speak. Again, separation, but balance. They're not balanced. They're high one way and low the other. But ultimately, we recognize in these beings things that they may not recognize in themselves. So I just wanted to share that. So coming back into neutrality, easy, hard, right? Depending on where we're at. Bubbles. Sometimes our bubbles are burst. We may have a bubble, and let's say it's a particular person and they represent a bubble. And within that particular, the example I just gave of disappointment, expectation, judgment, maybe a little sadness, those were all encapsulated within a belief I had around this particular person, for example, or what this person represented to me. That bubble was burst. What a gift. Because now it's not just one bubble where I dig into something and I go, ooh, I'm feeling shame about this, or anger. I'm going to integrate that and digest it and process it. Now it's like all of those things. And in that moment, I can see all of those things in this one bubble. Pop and integrate. Digest, 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 digest. That simple. Not always, but it can be that easy. And what I'm feeling is these energies have shifted so much that that's how easy it can be. And ultimately bringing it back into the beginning of this video, the communication, the beliefs are us, this friction is us in resistance. And sometimes it is about asking those questions, why? But other times it's just about acknowledging. And then sometimes those questions no longer become relevant. I could say I'm having a memory about a childhood trauma, I'll draw it back into that, and sometimes it is relevant because there are other bubbles associated with that childhood trauma that are being exposed that may be a little bit more solidified, right? They may have more, be more encapsulated, right? But sometimes that's just a story that we've been telling ourselves about. It's going to take me a long time because this trauma was so extensive. I speak from personal experience. I've had quite a bit happen in my lifetime. Very traumatic things. And I honor those experiences now, and I still have things that come up. I just find that those memories that are surfacing are, if I can allow that belief that I had about that particular event to not dig in and really like a screw into the earth, like really hone in and say, nope, I'm going to sit here for a moment and really pull this apart. Yes, sometimes it's the way it works. Other times it's like, do I really have to hold on to that still? Do I really, it's like, boom, pop. And then that creates a ripple effect. I keep picturing like a bubble bath. If you ever popped a bubble, it's like all of a sudden a big chunk. You're like, oh man, I just popped like 500 bubbles. Good. In this particular circumstance, not if you're having a bubble bath, of course. You want more bubbles, but it's good because then that chunk that falls out, that sloughs off, you can see everything else more clearly. And it's sometimes our being guided to talk more about the channeling. So it used to be that we had to do all of these things to bring us up. Now, many of us have done so much of the work that it feels uncomfortable when we're trying to go back down and dig in to those belief systems and structures and stories and even forms of communication, because it's that quickly You know, we say a word, we don't even have to say it. We can just open our mouth to say it, and all of a sudden we're like, nope, that doesn't fit. Doesn't fit anymore. That feels awkward to even think about that, because the thoughts are outside of us, right? In essence, they are not who we are. They are mapping systems that we are tapping into. And what we're doing is we're essentially lining up with those or tuning into those thoughts. And now if they're not there, to bring them in and through is hard work if it's not in alignment, because that's the way of multidimensionality in these higher frequencies. So it's flip it and reverse it. Instead of us having to climb our way and dig our way out, it kind of feels like it's the other way around now. Like, whoa, I really had to dig deep for that one. And that was more painful for me to have to do it the old way than it was just to let it go and integrate it and be okay with that. So I hope that was a little helpful for somebody out there listening and feeling into what I'm sharing, because how I teach is a resonance. How I share is a resonance. My healing work is our work. It's tuning into what I'm tuning into, essentially, if we make that choice together as a collective experience in our own unique individual expression, right? So anyways, much love. Namaste.